I think you've taken Iron Man on this great epic journey through these films, but I want you to tell me if you ever thought, when you first started reading this one, that there'd be this fight with Avengers versus Avengers.
I know. Well, I want to say, you know, I had it all mapped out in my head. I've been on the whole roller coaster, you know, for years and years now. It's just been great. I think we're going into our 10th year. I remember the comic book series Civil War, and I thought, man, if we could pull that off, that'd be swell. But I didn't. It was never really in the docket of like, this is a definitive going to happen Marvel movie. So no.
I think sometimes people take roles in like a Star Trek movie, and then they're sitting in that makeup chair for 3 hours every morning.
Yeah.
Was there a time when you got to the set this time that you said, not the suit again, or is it fun to put it on?
Well, what I realized is there is safety, fun, and relief in numbers because, for instance, I'm sure that Chris would tell you that he's in every shot of the movie practically. Now, I'm on the poster, but still, whenever you put the suit on and they've improved it over time, it is always that thing. But I thought rather than do that typical thing of really fortunate people complaining about their circumstances, I've come to love the suit.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
It's the right attitude to have. I look at you putting on the suit or it goes on all over you. I just wonder if that brings the 9 or 10-year-old Robert out in you in those moments where it just is kind of cool. Do you see it through a kid's eyes?
I do, and also, you know, now there's kids that are visiting the set for a bunch of different reasons. So, and back on the second Avengers, the Age of Ultron that we did before this, my son Exton was visiting the set, and he was going bananas for all the Hawkeye stuff, and you know, he's kind of over it now because he knows that Dad's deeply invested in it, so it's a little bit less, you know, numinous to him.
I just like that the wonder is still there.
Yeah.
So we know you play a great Iron Man. What do you think makes Chris Evans a great Captain America?
I really couldn't imagine anyone else in that role. And from the first outing, I think also it's probably the highest degree of difficulty of all the superheroes in the Marvel world to get right. And so I think there's just a certain confidence and humility you had to have going in. And Chris has gotten more and more detached from his own neurosis or judgment as the years have gone by. I mean, initially you're like, oh my God, the thing with the shield and what if, and then once it was so embraced by, you know, the movie going public, I think it's really, it's also afforded him the opportunity to do a lot of other stuff he wants with, you know, directing and all that. So, you know, he just has a great, first of all, to look good in that helmet is like, I don't know, they should have done like a random like facial pattern search, you know. It was just the right guy for the job.
I agree. Okay, this is the deep question from Disney.
Thank you.
Tony Stark does a flip-flop when he sides with the government. As an actor, how did you approach making that change seem grounded and intrinsic for the audience?
Well, it's funny, I was thinking a couple days ago in Iron Man 2, I'm saying that the government can't have the suit and it's my private property and all that stuff, and now I'm saying we got to sign it all over. But I think about it, I was just relating to it as it just being a function of age, like the things you're so determined and passionate about in your 30s and 40s. When you start looking at the back 9, you're like, or maybe I'm entirely wrong, you know, because you don't really have the time and energy to stay as rigid, you know.
And you say 30s and 40s, but this movie takes you back to when you were a teenager. I want that camera in my life every day.
I know.
That's great special effects.
Right, but it's kind of like, it would be like some healthy hallucinogen wearing off, and then you're like, oh no, the real world again. Yeah, I don't even want to know how they did it.
There is this spectacle and this grand scale of things, but there is this human conflict in the movie, and that's what I kept writing down in my notes, that it just seems so much more real than a lot of movies like this. So did you tell me about that human conflict, and then the conflict you have to deal with Steve Rogers, which is pretty emotional in this film?
Yeah. Well, again, I mean, there's so many people to credit. There's the way Jon Favreau set up just the first Iron Man movie, that it seemed like anything that's going to hinge off this world, we're going to pretend that somehow or other it could belong in this world. And then from the first Avengers film, Joss Whedon was, to his credit, and Marvel and Kevin and everybody they're like, all right, we just want to kind of feather this in and lightly insinuate that there's going to be trouble down the road. And so I think, the prologue to it has been really well executed, which to me is just a movie goer and someone who just loves movies and follows things and series and gets strung out on all this stuff, I just appreciate the care with which it's been executed. But then I guess too, sometimes I have felt guilty about the jealousy or envy I've had for other people's relationships with the world, or just like that childish thing of why, and because Tony's dad Howard so felt that Steve Rogers was the definitive American, he was like a son to him. Mm-hmm. And then there's always, as usual, all this kind of dark tragedy around everything. So, it was in there. It was always in the comic books. And then I credit the Russos, the directors, for really being able to, again, keep it grounded. And once they took over the Captain America side of things, I felt like they were kind of pretty close to Favreau's original ideation of how things should be played.
So you mentioned the Russos, and I think it would be difficult enough to work with one director, but you've got two minds working. Do they always work in sync? Do you love it? What's the difference?
Well, first of all, usually, there's no good cop, bad cop. They're both really flexible in the way they work. So, but then there'd be certain things, like if I was doing the HUD work where I'm like sitting with a camera 5 inches away from my face, and it's really just odd and uncomfortable. Usually Anthony would be the person to deal with that because there's something just a little bit more receptive about him. But Joe would have done great too, and I just love watching a team work together.
Sounds like you're saying two heads are better than one here.
Yeah, it got me thinking every film should have at least two directors, because you can't get mad at everybody all at the same time. Yeah, well, look, there's times and parts of it where I'm sure, like in the arc of doing a character on a long-running series or whatever, the mind can start going, oh, what else is there or whatever. But it's just been such a great, it's been a great experience for me, and I'm super grateful.
Okay, back to the list.
All right.
There are new Avengers who joined Team Iron Man. Were they predictable choices, or were there surprises in that selection?
I wouldn't say any of them are predictable per se, but to me, again, going back to the second Iron Man, which to me seems like ages ago, Agent Romanoff, now obviously Black Widow, and it always seemed like just everybody wanted her to not like me or me to not trust her, so I thought it was really smart. And again, the thing Marvel does so well is if you're going to have an expectation or start divvying up who you think will be on what side, there's always a couple of surprises. So
we have Black Panther in the movie now. What do you think
Yes.
of that introduction, and what do you think Chadwick Boseman brought to the role?
Without taking away from anything else, I think it's the most exciting thing that's happened in the history of the universe, because there was enough space and enough success to go and say, well, really, how do you explain the Marvel universe in its entirety, and how it's evolved over time? And so, just coming from such a technologically advanced country, and being someone who very much has his own agenda, and then there's just Chadwick himself, who to me is such a dynamic just guy, and obviously a great actor, but I think it's a super inspired piece of casting. And then and then knowing that Mr. Coogler is directing him in the Black Panther movie, to me it was like, man, that might just take the cake right there.
Yeah, I think he's a terrific actor. I agree with you. Okay, there's an epic battle scene between these two teams, and there's emotional responses as you're doing it because you kind of like each other, I guess. Yeah. How did you feel when you squared off against Team Cap?
Well, part of it is, and I hate to say it, it's a very Western thing. When you're on a team, you're on a team, kind of like a platoon. And automatically, if you're looking over the trenches at anything else, you tend to get in that kind of competitive spirit. we all spent a fair amount of time together. I actually feel like I got to know Team Cap better just because I was able to observe them more because I wouldn't be shooting oftentimes when they were. So regardless of how we were playing it, I was just looking at, I mean, now you look on this poster and there's 10 individuals on it. And I'm like, wow, I'm just glad I'm, still relevant.
What can fans expect when they see Captain America Civil War?
They can expect the unexpected, but they will have that that trademark Marvel entertainment and sophistication and storytelling and just really strong performances.
Most fun thing of the entire shooting experience for you, and it may have been just on your day off, but you're
there's one sequence where, without giving too much away, there's a threat, and we have to try to contain it. And things have gotten to the point where there's so many suits and heroes and everything that we were thinking, what if he just has a watch that kind of turns into a weapon for a second? So there's still always this innovation that occurs. So we basically literally had, in this one sequence, Tony just basically has a watch that kind of turns into a one-shot Derringer. And so it's gone from the point where it's like, a 20-minute sequence used to get me excited. Now one little frame and all that.
It's a great moment, though.
Yeah.
Okay, the Barbara Walters question from Disney. If you could describe the film in one word, what would it be and why?
Rad. I'm from New York, but I'm a Californian now.
Fair enough. Okay. And the last question I have for you really is that the audiences are rooting for everyone. They are so invested. Whenever I go to one of these movies, I am stunned. They're unlike any other audience. Yeah. Have you figured out what that is? And have you ever sat in the back of a theater to just enjoy that response?
I have, and I suspect I will with this too. But it's just like, again, Jungle Book's going to be out in a minute, and other of my friends do movies, and I think there's this, there's just kind of a fraternity of people who don't poo-poo this kind of genre movie, and I met a fair amount of them the first time I went to Comic-Con, and I am friendly with people who kind of, peek out of the closet and you go, dude, I'm crazy about Civil War or whatever. So I think, again, that, because the movies are just executed very well, they exist as just pure entertainment. But then there's this little constellation that gets lit up in people who are fans of the comics back in the day or just love this kind of storytelling. So, I'm all for geeking out on Marvel picks.